Welcome to Metal Matters, a Gimme Radio podcast. I'm your host, Mike Hill, and I'll be leading you on this adventure. We'll be getting into deep discussions about classic records, profiles on up-and-coming bands, and interviews with your favorite artists. You can check out new episodes every week, so be sure to subscribe and never miss out. Hey guys, I can't tell you how stoked I am for this next episode. Like most people that listen to this show, I love Black Sabbath, particularly the Dio era. That's Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, and Dehumanizer. So it's with great honor that I introduce my next guest, Vinny Appice. He did most of the Heaven and Hell tour, played drums on Mob Rules and Dehumanizer, as well as played drums with Dio and a host of other bands. So with that said, not only was Vinny the drummer on some of my favorite records, he also has a brand new record coming out for his band The Last in Line, aptly titled Last in Line 2. Real quick, before we get started, please check out my Gimme Radio DJ show, The Sacred and Profane. It comes out twice a month, so if you haven't checked this out yet, download the Gimme app and have at it. So your name comes up quite a bit when we're talking about drummers and legendary bands and all that stuff. And the first question I have for you, and this is a big, heavy question, how do you pronounce your last name?
I'm Appice.
Okay, Appice.
Carmine's Appice.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
And actually, we have another older brother. He doesn't play. He says a peach.
Really?
The Italian way. Yeah.
Yes, because I would think it was a peachy.
Yeah, it's actually, it looks like a piece, but it's always pronounced Appice. That's the way my father pronounced it. And Carmine used to say Appice. And when he started playing with Rod Stewart, he pronounced it a piece. So he's changed it to a piece. And I didn't like the way that sounded, so I just stuck with what my father said, which was Appice.
Are you guys still close, you and Carmine?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do a show together called Drum Wars and with a band and play music from our histories. We have a ball, yeah.
Oh, great.
We're very close.
Nice. And you guys are both native New Yorkers too, right? From Brooklyn?
Yeah, from Brooklyn. Yeah, Borough Park, actually.
Oh, nice. Okay. So this it's not a new band, but for The Last in Line, there's an interesting story as to how this whole band formed. It's the original Dio lineup, and you guys hadn't played together in over 2 decades. So how did that come together?
Well, I think it was 2000, when was it? 12, I think. 11 or 12. Viv called me up. We kept in touch over the years, not a lot, but we did keep in touch. And he called up and said, "Hey, I spoke to Jimmy. You want to get together and jam, play, just have some fun, with some of the old songs?" I said, "Sure." So we went into a rehearsal place, just the three of us, jammed out some of these songs, and we had a good time, trying to remember the parts. Viv's trying to remember the solos. So we had such a good time that we got together again the following week, and I called Andy Freeman, who's a friend of mine. I said, "You're in town. Why don't you come down and sing? We're just going to jam some Dio stuff. It'd be fun." So he came down and he blew everybody away singing this stuff. And it was so good, and there was just some magic there that we said, "Why don't we do some gigs, So that's the way it started. We started doing some gigs, and the reaction from the fans, hearing the old Dio stuff from us, they were freaking out. And then from there, our manager, Steve Strange, got us a record deal with Frontiers Records, and we were able to record one album called Heavy Crown, which came out in 2016. And now we just finished the second album, which will be out February 22nd.
And Andy Freeman, I'm familiar with him from the Lynch Mob. What other bands was he in prior to playing with you guys?
He sang in Offspring a little. I think he played guitar in Offspring. And then he was with the Rock Vault show in Las Vegas for years, like 6 or 7 years or something like that. So he sang in that show, and he sang with George. That's how I met him a long time ago. We did a tour together. I did played with George, and Andy was a singer, and George likes to books a lot of gigs in a row. You know, could be 15 gigs in a row. It's pretty crazy, and he was able to sing 15 gigs, and not many singers could do that. So back then, this was a while ago, I got Andy's number. I said, wow, that's incredible. You were able to do this and got a good head on his shoulders, you know, no drugs, no alcohol problems. So we kept in touch, you know.
So now the original lineup for The Last in Line was Jimmy Bain, you know, original member of that Rainbow lineup, and also you know, obviously from Deep Purple. I'm sorry, not Deep Purple, from Rainbow. Vivian Campbell, you know, another guy, Whitesnake, and the Sweet Savage. That's another band, a new wave of British heavy metal band of that he played in way back.
Yeah, that was his first band before Dio.
Yeah, that's, you know, that's like, I grew up listening to that stuff, so, you know, that stuff is
Matter
definitely.
Of fact, Sweet Savage, you know, Viv came out of Sweet Savage into Dio, and the song Stand Up and Shout was actually part of a Sweet Savage song.
Really?
Yeah, I never heard it, but that's where it came from. That's what I was told, and we changed it around. Obviously, they added some things to it, but yeah, that was an idea from Sweet Savage.
Now, when you guys had the first record out, did you play? Were you still mixing in some of the Dio songs as well, or was it all just straight up originals throughout that?
When we started playing live, you know, the first bunch of, actually before we recorded the album, was all old Dio stuff.
Right.
All the classic stuff, because we didn't have any other songs, you know. So we did that, and then once we recorded the album, we started with 2 songs in the set. Then as the album was out, people knew the songs. We put 3. I think we went to 4 at the very end because people knew the songs, you know, the fans. So now we'll have to put songs in from the new album. You know, we'll start the same way. Probably put 2 in, you know, because people still want to hear the really old classic stuff.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
You know, we love playing it, so.
Yeah, it's probably fun too, you know, getting together.
Yeah.
And so do you guys play the big European festivals and all that sort of stuff once you guys started hitting the road?
Yeah, we mainly started in the U.S. and then eventually, actually we started in the U.S. and then we went to Europe and did like 5 or 6 shows, and that went really well. Then we came back mainly to U.S. until 2017. We did a tour with Saxon in Europe and a bunch of dates on our own in Europe. So this year we're going to go to Download Festival. We're going to be on that show with Def Leppard, which is cool.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do a show in London on our own too. Just 2 shows right now. For Europe.
If my memory serves me correctly, I believe, didn't Vivian Campbell also do some work with Def Leppard in the past as well?
Oh, he's in Def Leppard.
He's in Def Leppard, right. Yeah.
He's been there for 20
years.
He says that's his day job.
So is he doing double duty when you guys are playing with them?
Well, we kind of work around their schedule.
Okay.
You know, they're the mothership. So when they're not touring, which is like they start up sometime maybe in June. So we're touring all the way through May, starting 2 weeks from now. And so we have to work around schedules, you know.
Sure. So Jimmy Bain passed away a few years ago. And did the thought of not continuing the band ever come up? Or, you know, did you guys ever discuss any of that?
Yeah. It was discussed. And the thought came up like, you know, what are we going to do? You know, it's just like when anybody passes away, you freak out, and it's really, really hard to deal with. But yeah, we gave it some time, and then Viv and I talked, and Andy, and we decided, hey, Jimmy would want us to continue, you know.
Yeah.
So let's just do it, and that's what we did. And then we auditioned bass players. Yeah, after a couple of months after Jimmy died, you know, we just took time off to absorb that. And then we started auditioning a couple of bass players. And then Phil Soussan came down, and he's a good friend of both of us, all of us actually, and he comes from the same school of rock that we did, same era, and he played with Ozzy, he played with Billy Idol, and he's a good friend. We all get along, so that was important. So he fit in like a glove,
So with the songwriting process, do you guys write as a band, or is like, say one guy come in with a song completely done and demoed and all that sort of stuff? Like, how do you guys approach songwriting?
Like it's funny, with all the bands I've been in, starting from Black Sabbath, the Mob Rules album, nobody came in with a song.
Okay.
We got into a rehearsal room and we jammed. And always, I don't know how I got assigned the duty, but I was the guy recording the stuff. I mean, back then, it was a cassette recorder that maybe we had 2 mics on, and we go in a room and I would record things that came up that were interesting with Sabbath, and that's how we did Mob Rules. Nobody really came up with songs. Just started building on something either we played or later on the next day we listened to on tape. Oh, that's pretty good. Let's try to make something out of this riff or idea. And that's the way it's been on all the Dio records and all the and Last in Line as well. Both of these albums will just go in there and start with nothing, and just jam away, record some riffs, and a couple of Last in Line things were actually recorded in the dressing room. When Viv's warming up, he tends to play off the cuff. He just plays anything.
Right.
And you walk in, you go, "What's that?" He goes, "I don't know." So I'll record it. So we had about 8 of those, and we listened to them, and they were quite good. So sometimes we started with what he played from the dressing room and built that into a song.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people.
It's actually a more natural way for the band to sound like a band rather than somebody that wrote a song that maybe I'm not comfortable with some of the accents, the way he played them, and this way it's just builds with everybody involved, gets created.
Yeah, I feel like some of my favorite music has been written that way, be it Sabbath or Dio or Led Zeppelin or, any of those bands.
Yeah.
Deep Purple. So I have a bunch of Sabbath questions, but since we're talking about, you mentioned Mob Rules, you joined Sabbath like on the road, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, Sabbath were on the road for the Heaven and Hell tour, supporting that album, and they were supposed to play Denver, and Bill Ward left the band at that point, so they had to postpone that gig, and they had a couple days off, so they came to LA, obviously starting to put the feelers out, like, we need to get a drummer, so I got a call, and I don't know how they got my number or from who, I think from maybe Warner Brothers, and they heard me play on some stuff, and the tour manager said, "You want to come down to meet Tony Iommi?" I said, "Sure." This all happened in Los Angeles, so I went down and met Tony, and we hit it off great. And he had an album that I did prior called Axis, and it was produced by Andy Johns. That album was a kind of hard rock album, so he had it with him, and he liked it. So he heard me play, he liked the way I play, and we hit it off. Then next day I went down to rehearsal, met the rest of the band, and then we started rehearsing to continue the tour, So I was in the band on the premise of, well, Bill might come back.
Right.
So as the weeks and months went by, it didn't look like Bill was coming back. And then we had to do a song for a movie called Heavy Metal. So we were in England, and we went into John Lennon's house because there's a studio in there. We had 2 days, and we went there and stayed there, which was really cool. And he actually wrote and recorded the Mob Rules song. And that was for that movie.
Yeah, I remember that movie. That had a pretty cool soundtrack. I think Blue Oyster Cult was on that too, and yeah.
Yeah, and that's a different version of Mob Rules, and that's on our album. We re-recorded it in L.A. once we did it. So once we started the album. So when we recorded it, it came out so good. It was like, wow, Vinny works in the studio too. You know, the band sounds great. So that kind of gave me more assurance that I was going to stay in the band. You know, Bill wasn't going to come back. You know, so that's what happened. And then we continued, and then finished the tour. Went in the studio. First we rehearsed, had to come up with the material, and then went in the studio and did them all rules.
Yeah, that's it's funny. Even though I love the first 4 Sabbath records with Ozzy, the Dio material was actually the first material I heard by Sabbath. So it was the Mob Rules record, and you know, for about a year, I was a kid. I thought that's what Sabbath sounded like, and I was like, wow, this is really cool, you know. And then I went back and I heard the Ozzy stuff, and it was obviously way different. And it scared me originally. I was like, 13 years old when I heard the song Black Sabbath, and it was like terrifying to me, you know. But
me too. It was like, wow. My friend played me that first album, and I was into Zeppelin and Hendrix, and listen a little bit Deep Purple. So then I heard Sabbath, and I'm like, wow, this album sounds weird, man. The drums are really dry and very evil and dark sounding, and then Ozzy's voice and even the cover was scary.
Exactly. Yeah, with a witch on it and everything. And also your drumming style differs pretty drastically from Bill Ward, who has like that sort of looser like blues feel, and like his fills are a little bit different. And so I mean the stuff that you guys were writing, I think is pretty well suited to the way you're playing. Because I actually am familiar with the Axis record you did too as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
cool.
So it's like has more of like a I would say on the beat sort of vibe to it, as opposed to like the pocket that Bill had.
Yeah. Well, Bill always said he was a percussionist and not a drummer.
I could see that.
And if you listen to the stuff, that's the way he played. He played stuff on the toms sometimes that instead of a, snare and bass drum thing, he's playing on the toms on this whole part. And that stuff is great. It's so very creative. So Bill's stuff was his unique style, and when I joined the band, I had to play those songs similar to that,
Right.
So my style's different. I listen to John Bonham, which is more powerful grooves and some crazy fills and stuff.
Right.
So, but the stuff Bill did was very creative. I love it.
Was that the first time you'd met Ronnie James Dio? Was like when you joined the band?
Yeah, the first time I met Ronnie James Dio, it's funny because before I got the call to go down to play with Sabbath, I heard Neon Nights on the radio.
Yeah.
And I'm driving and I went, oh man, I didn't know who Ronnie was really. I knew Man on the Silver Mountain, Long Live Rock and Roll, but I wasn't familiar with Rainbow, didn't follow it. And I heard Sabbath, Neon Nights, and I went, that singer's really good. The new singer for Sabbath, man, he sings great. So I was really like impressed. And then when I went down to meet the band, I met Ronnie that day, and they said, "What song you want to play?" And I said, "How about Neon Nights?" I didn't really know it. I didn't listen to it, but I knew it was a fast song and it was pretty much straight ahead for the drums, and I can get through it. So that's the first song I played with the band and Ronnie. And 33 years later, it was the last song I played with Ronnie.
Really? Oh, yeah, with that in Heaven and Hell. Like on that.
Heaven and Hell, yeah. And that song's been an opener. It's been in the middle. It's been at the end. It goes all over the place. And then at the last tour, it was at the end. And it just kind of finished the whole thing, like first song I played with him and last song I played with him. And the whole journey in between,
So like my impression is that you guys had a really good relationship because you played on so many records together, you and Dio.
Yeah, we were like, we became really, really close, like brothers. His parents would come over from New York in the winter to spend the winter in California. They'd come over to my house with Ronnie. We'd have dinner. We'd play poker, and it was like very, very close. Ronnie knew all my family, and then we had the same interests. We both were like, like to repair the house and go to Home Depot, believe it or not, and fix stuff and cars and different things like that, And then I got into computers. I took care of Ronnie's computers. And so we had a lot of things in common, so we became very close.
Yeah, Dio, in my opinion, my two favorite like classic metal singers, Dio and Rob Halford. I think.
I knew you were going to say that.
Oh, really?
I said he's going to say Rob Halford. Yeah, Rob's amazing. Yeah. Amazing.
And
we played with Rob on one gig. This was in 1992.
Really, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because Ozzy was doing a retirement gig, actually with 2 nights down at Irvine Meadows in California, a big place, and they wanted Sabbath on the show, and Ronnie didn't want to do it. He didn't want to go on before Ozzy, and he had his reasons, and so the band wanted to do it. I'm in the middle, so I sat down with Ronnie, and we worked it out, and we got Rob Halford to sing. We rehearsed with him one day, and he had to learn all those songs.
Damn.
But it was killer, Rob was great. It's amazing. And so we did it, and that was the end of the band at that point, 92.
Yeah, then there was this whole other period of just different vocalists and whatnot, and then you guys came and made the Dehumanizer record.
Right. Well, I think that was after Dehumanizer. That was after we had Dehumanizer out.
Oh, wait. Yeah, you're right. I'm thinking about the record with Ian Gillan that came in the middle of all that. The Born Again record.
The history was we did Heaven and Hell tour, Mob Rules, Live Evil, then the band broke up, and that was in 82 it broke up, and then we formed Dio, and then we got back together in 90, and started on Dehumanizer, and then did this show, and then that was the end of that band era. Band kept breaking up. Crazy.
Yeah, Sabbath, it's hard to believe that it's over with them. I'd like to think that at some point there's going to be yet another. I saw them on a couple of those last reunion, gigs they had with Ozzy. And it was great. And it's hard to believe that like an institution like that's going to disappear. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I've been offered like last year, actually about 3 or 4 years ago, a band out here. They were Sabbath tribute band, and they said, "Why don't you come down and play with us one night?" And I said, "All right, that'd be fun." So we learned it was mostly the old Sabbath with Ozzy,
right? Stuff.
That's what they did. So I went down and played, and people went crazy, So it was like, interesting. And then last year, I did something in Cincinnati with a band like that, but we did more Dio stuff too.
Right.
And it was successful. And then I got offered to go to Europe. And what we did was we called it the Mob Rules Live. And I had a kick-ass band in Europe, and we toured for 5-6 weeks. And the set list was, mostly Mob Rules, some old Sabbath, and a couple of sprinkles of Dio songs. And people went crazy. So I'm doing another one of those in July in Europe. And it's, people want to hear this stuff. I'm the only real one left, especially any ties to any of the Dio Sabbath.
Right, right.
And then from secondary Black Sabbath, if they're not doing it, Ozzy's going to retire. Nobody's out there that was from the band, that really was from band A and band B. So I'm doing this, and it's a lot of fun, It's
Sure.
a lot of fun doing it. So, and people love it,
And as time goes by, I feel like those records, they're finding their place. You know what I mean? Because like I actually listed as part of the show, I do a classic albums episodes, and I had Heaven and Hell as a classic record before I got into the Ozzy stuff. And maybe because for me personally, like I was saying, that was the first Sabbath I heard, and that has definitely a special place in my heart. But sure. I think in addition to that, a lot of other fans are I wouldn't say rediscovering, but they're putting that in its right place as far as like the career of Black Sabbath. You know what I mean? In their catalog.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's funny because I hear that a lot. That the first time they heard Sabbath was on Heaven and Hell, and it's amazing. You go, wow.
Yeah.
You missed the whole beginning of how they started, and like we were talking about how scary that album was for the time, you know, and even the names were scary. You look at the credits, you go, Iommi. What kind of name is that?
Yeah, totally.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Geezer.
What is that?
Geezer
Bill
Butler.
Ward was probably the most normal, and then you go Geezer Butler. What's a geezer? You know, in the States.
Yeah.
In England, it's geezer. Yeah. So, you know, that whole thing was missed, and then when people discover that, it's a pretty amazing band. You know, when you think about it.
So.
Career, I should say.
Yeah. So prior to forming the Dio band, like you know, was there a lot of discussion with you and Ronnie about doing a band after Sabbath, or you know, how did you guys discuss that? Like, what was the genesis of that band?
Well, what happened was Ronnie had a record deal with Warner Brothers, a solo deal. He always had it, you know, and but we were touring with Sabbath on Heaven and Hell, and then doing Mob Rules, Live Evil. So we were busy. So Ronnie thought, well, Sabbath was going to last, that he would do a solo record with all his friends, like get all like Carrie Ligrum from Kansas was a good friend, and I would play on it, Carrie, all the different people, maybe Cozy, you know, Cozy Powell. So that was the idea of his record deal. He thought he'd do a solo thing like that. But then when things started to turn, he realized that, you know, I think I want to put a band together of my own finally, you know. So that's when he told me, listen, I'm going to leave Sabbath and I'm going to do a new band. You want to do it with me? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So that's how that started. And then we went to look for players. We went to England to look, you know, Ronnie wanted, we tried some guitar players in the States. We even tried Jakey Lee, and Ronnie wanted some European players to make it more like international. And Ronnie's always played with people from all over the world, you know, so
right.
Like with Richie Blackmore, and it gave it a different flavor. So we went to England, and that's where we hooked up with Jimmy Bain, who knew Vivian Campbell. And we got together and jammed in London, and it was like really, really kicking ass. So we went, this is it, you know, this is the band. That's
awesome. And you were with Dio like the whole run, basically.
Yeah, I was with him up until about 87, and then the band turned. It changed, you know. We had the band, it was very successful for 3 years, you know, with Viv. Then he wanted to change guitar players. You know, him and Viv weren't seeing eye to eye, so in comes Craig Goldie. Okay, you know, so it changed the band up a little bit, changed the sound of the band, and it wasn't the same. And then eventually the whole band was changed. It became all these new guys, you know.
Right.
And unknown guys, and it was like, you know, and they're really young, and I thought, you know, this is like, maybe it's time for me to leave and go do something else. So so I left in 87 and played with Jimmy Bain with a band called World War III. We did one album. So I was with Ronnie for probably 7 years, you know, total.
So you know, going back a few years down the line, with the formation of Heaven and Hell, that sort of, I remember that came out, and I was like, oh, this is perfect, you know, but why isn't this called Black Sabbath? And I'm sure there was like legal reasons and all this other stuff as to that as well, right?
Yeah, there was some sort of legal thing, and then I think it was more down to calling it Heaven and Hell defines the band more as this is the Ronnie era. We're not playing the old stuff. You know, because in 1980 we played all the old stuff
right.
too.
Yeah, there's only one record available, you know, or two
only one record together, and they threw in that. And then years later, we had Dehumanizer and Mob Rules out and Live Evil. So Ronnie didn't want to sing those songs anymore, the old stuff. So that's why it was called Heaven and Hell, basically, the main reason.
Right.
So it defined it better, you know.
So out of all the records that you played on, you must have like some favorites, you know what I mean? I mean, you got a huge catalog of material. And For you, what are some personal favorite records that you played on?
Yeah, I'm glad you said a few because I can't pick one.
No, it's never one. It's never just one.
It would be definitely Holy Diver. I'll pick two, Holy Diver and Mob Rules. You know, they're just some legendary albums. They became legendary albums. And they're just great songs and great playing, great sound, great covers. It was just the right thing at the right time, you know. And those two albums, believe it or not, are still selling and downloaded, you know.
Oh, totally.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think Dio still, I mean, even like, you know, younger people still recognize Ronnie James Dio and Black Sabbath and the Dio band and all that stuff as like, you know, crucial music, you know what I mean? As well as like some of the new stuff that's coming out, you know.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of you know. So I do drum clinics. I do a lot of different things, you know, rock camps and all these things. And there's young kids that are just all getting into the old classic music from Sabbath, Zeppelin, Hendrix, Deep Purple. You know, they're discovering this stuff. I mean, those pretty much that kind of music you could learn how to play from. Some of the stuff today is so produced, and I don't know, you know, there's some of it you can learn from, some of it's just like a good song.
Yeah.
And you listen to it. It's not as inspiring as listening to maybe Hendrix and listening to, for me, Mitch Mitchell playing fills on the drums.
Right.
With no effects or anything, just raw drums, or, you know, Zeppelin's first albums, just guitar, bass, and drums, a couple of overdub guitars and solos. You go, man, I want to learn that. So those albums were totally, you know, inspiring for me, and I think for some of the new kids, the young kids listening to them today, because they could hear actual playing on it. You know, nobody had computers and pasted in the second verse, you know, like we do now.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the whole thing, and also just even drum programming is is insane. I mean, there's that Superior Drummer, which is like, you know, if you play guitar and you're writing songs, you can just drag and drop like verses and choruses in pre-canned, you know.
And even the drums, you listen to drums. Sometimes I go, is that a drum machine or is that a drummer? Because if it's a drummer, sometimes it's so perfect and fixed, you know, that you can't tell the difference. Sometimes on a lot of records I do, I make a mistake and I'll leave it in because it's weird, you know. It's weird and it's not exactly perfect, but it gives it a human element to it. It's got soul, you know.
Yeah, actually, you're not the first person that has said that as far as drummers I've spoken to. Like it adds like a human, like an organic quality to it that gives it character, you know. Yeah. You may put a click up to it. I mean, all the albums like Holy Diver, those big albums, the Mob Rules, Last of Mine, we didn't use a click. You know, I didn't never use a click. So if you look, and if you put a metronome onto the song in the beginning, it probably sped up a little bit by the end. Sure. Yeah.
But that was cool. That's the way it felt.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you listen to Sabbath, you know, old Sabbath and Zeppelin, those tempos are all over the place. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, the song The Wizard. You know, it's like,
yeah, you listen to that. I mean, I watched them play together. You know, from the side of the stage, and just from them starting together and playing together from when they were young, just know how to block it in, even though it doesn't make sense timing wise. Like you couldn't count it. 2, 3, they just come in and they play it like one giant guy, you know. It's just, they know how to feel it together, you know. And the tempos are different. And it works, you know.
Yeah, because even listening to like live albums and stuff too, you know, it's you know, there was a Sabbath record called Alive at Last, which is like, I think it was like 45 minutes long, and it was like just noise and everything, and the songs are actually slower than they are on the album. You know what I mean? It's like they have like this heavier, like slower feel to it live, which is always like, wow, those guys like play slower live. I guess it's weird.
Well, they were tired.
They were tired. Yeah. But
yeah, that's funny, you know. Yeah. I mean, that's the first Sabbath album. From what I know, they went into the studio. They were on the road playing pubs in England. You know, they weren't known. And they went in the studio and just played the set, recorded it, and then put additional guitar on it, maybe double the vocals. And they did it in a couple days.
Yeah.
And there you go. It's like major album, you know.
So we were talking about, you know, certain inspirations that you had in bands. You said you liked Hendrix and Zeppelin. Were there any other artists, like when you were forming your sort of musical, you know, vocabulary that you were inspired by?
Yeah, it was mainly, you know, my brother was an inspiration, you know, because I'm not 11 years younger than him. So watching what he was doing was pretty inspiring, and that's why I got into drums. But, you know, Zeppelin was a major thing. And then there were things like a band Mahavishnu Orchestra, I heard, because Billy Cobham was on drums, and it was just incredible playing on there. So I was inspired by some of that stuff too. And Buddy Rich, you know, and I mean, I'm not a jazz freak or anything, but just listening to that, I can't play any of that stuff, you know, and you watch him play, and totally inspiring, you know. All the stuff I listened to had drummers that took chances, like Mitch Mitchell, Carmine, Ginger Baker. By that, they just didn't play the song; they played fills that became part of the song, and especially Bonham.
Yeah.
And that's how I grew up playing. Like, well, if I'm going to make albums, I want fans to listen to it and be inspired by the drums and try to learn what I did, because that's the way I grew up. I wanted to learn what Bonham did, or my brother did, or Mitch Mitchell. And, you know, that's the way I grew up. And that's why you listen to some of these albums, there's a lot of fills on them. But I don't just throw them in. I feel it, you know.
Yeah.
So it's not playing it safe. It's kind of taking a chance. Like, is this going to work? And doing it with Ronnie, you know, the great singer that he was, and he never said anything about playing over his vocal line. You know, he encouraged me to play as me and feel it. And then if you listen to Holy Diver, even Mob Rules, there's some fills that go over his vocals while he's singing.
I got to check that out again. I got to listen to that.
Yeah. Yeah, we inspired each other. So, but he never said, "Oh, don't play over my vocal line." You know, it was never like that. So he inspired me to do my thing, you know, which is cool of him. Very cool. We inspired each other, you know.
You mentioned Ginger Baker earlier, you know, and speaking about a guy who took chances, you know, that there was a documentary about him.
I saw it.
Oh man, what a wild man that guy was.
Hey, you know what? We did a rock camp. I do a lot of rock fantasy camps, you know. And my friend David Fishoff, who started it. And it's a great experience. It's a great event. It's really cool. So we did one with Ginger Baker.
Really?
And it wasn't very nice. Yeah, it wasn't very nice.
Huh.
Yeah, because he's supposed to, when you're booked on that, you know, he's supposed to play with the bands that are there. You know, there were all people that bought onto the camp. And that's what usually happens. And we've done it with, you know, Cheap Trick, Alice Cooper, Judas Priest played with everybody. So does Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons. So when it came down to Ginger Baker, he's on the stage and he's just rambling on the drums, and the band comes up to play with him. He doesn't acknowledge them, nothing. He just keeps playing, rambling on the drums, and nobody knew what to do.
Oh, you know? Yeah.
Nobody knew what to do. So basically they just started jamming a little bit with him. But it was definitely out of the norm of that, what was supposed to happen, you know. And then we took pictures, and he gave the finger in the pictures, all the pictures. That's funny. So I met him, you know. I said, "This is." They said he wanted to meet me. I don't know why. I don't think he did, but he, you know, my brother knows him. So, so I went in and, "Hi, I'm Vinny. I'm Carmine's brother." Oh, okay. Yeah, I said, funny. Okay. Then I left. Yeah.
Yeah, Cream.
Character, man.
Yeah, Cream's a band's got like song after song after song, man. They got so many great songs, so many great records. And, you know, for me, though I acknowledge Eric Clapton as, you know, an incredible musician, inspirational guy, that's really the only band of his that I go back and listen to, believe it or not.
Yeah. Blind Faith was a different band, you know, but Cream was just, you know, kick ass, you know.
Yeah.
You got just a three-piece band that just, you got Eric Clapton on guitar. I mean, it's just amazing, playing when he's playing heavier like that.
So the Last in Line is a new record coming out. It'll be out by the time this episode airs. And so are there any touring plans coming up for you guys?
Yeah, we start in about 2 weeks in California. We got a bunch of California, Arizona dates. Then we move on to the Midwest, Texas, and then eventually to the East Coast. And within that, we're doing 2 gigs in Europe, in England. One of them's Download Festival.
Right.
And then 1 show in London of our own. And so it's going to be busy up until probably beginning of June. That's when Def Leppard, we have a block for them. They'll probably start rehearsing and stuff. So I think they're going out in the summer, possibly.
Right.
So, yeah, and the album sounds great. We're really, really excited about it. We're really proud of it. We think it's a step up from the first record we did. And now we got Phil Soussan on bass. So the songs, they're pretty much the same rawness to them, but they're a little maybe more sophisticated, a little bit more complicated. And we got some great hooks and great playing. And, we produced it with Jeff Pilson, the band, and Jeff Pilson. And the guy mixing it, Chris Collier, just did an amazing job. It sounds real fat,
Yeah.
Cool sound. When the album sounds good, it's easy to listen to, too. When it sonically sounds good, on your system, people tend to want to listen to it more.
Actually, since you mentioned, I like to listen to music on a stereo, you know what I'm saying? And these days, unfortunately, it seems like people are listening to stuff on their phones and, in these weird degraded formats,
Yeah.
So it's like, it's kind of a letdown sometimes when you make what you think, you got a great sounding album and then it gets smashed down to MP3 and
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying?
I know. Well, you're missing the whole thing of, I don't know how old you are, but when I grew up, an album came out, you went to the store and got the vinyl album.
Yeah.
And you looked at the pictures and the artwork, and they were big. And, I would read on the album where it was recorded.
Yep.
Wow, where's that studio? Or they sometimes gave you a little information of what mics they use. And that stuff was interesting. And everything was easy to see because it was big on the 12-inch vinyl. And then it sounded great. Now people download stuff. You're missing the whole story of the album, the complete story, like the artwork or anything written in there. If you get a CD, it's hard to see because it's so small.
Right.
You got to sit there and read all the small print. So it's a different thing, So, and then the people just download it. You don't even get any of the information because it's not there. You're just getting the song, which is okay, but it's not the same experience,
Yeah, I still buy vinyl. I still really enjoy having the big format like that and, enjoying the artwork. And I was always big on reading the thank you lists, to find out what bands these guys toured with and,
exactly.
that kind of stuff. And that's how when I was a kid, I used to do that and find out about other bands to listen to that way,
Yeah, like you see somebody on there, like thanks to Jimmy Page. Go, wow, these guys knew Jimmy Page. I wonder how they knew him. Did they go over his house? Or that was cool stuff. It was like a story from the album. So the history.
Do you got any favorite tracks on the record? Standouts?
Well, there's a song out. There's a video out now called Landslide that came out last month, and that's a good one. There's a new one coming out probably in about a week. It's called Year of the Gun. It's going to be a lyric video, but it's a real fast song.
Mm-hmm.
Some crazy stuff on there. So I like them all. They're all interesting. They kind of go places, take you on a little bit of a journey, which is cool. So
yeah, I listened to the record a couple times, and the one that I keep going back to is "Give Up the Ghost." That's I like the vibe on that song. Too. That's a good one.
Yeah, that one's like just a kick-ass, attitude on that one.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, so I like them all. I'm really excited about the record. So hopefully everybody else will be.
Oh yeah, no, I think there's if you're a fan of hard rock, and heavy metal, I think for sure this is like something people would be listening to.
Yeah,
And hope to see you guys out there on the road. I'm assuming there's a New York date on the tour. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll be doing the East Coast probably toward the end of April into May. So keep an eye out, And then I don't know if you got my email address. You can send me an email. I'll put you on the guest list.
I appreciate that. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that, Vinny. Well, once again, thanks a lot for chatting. And great record. And
thank you.
Definitely be seeing you out there on the road.
All right, Mike. Thank you. Have a nice day, and good talking to you.
Take care, Vinny. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Metal Matters, a Gimme Radio podcast. We'll be back next week, so be sure to subscribe and never miss out. Also, be sure to check out Gimme Radio via web, iOS, or Android for one of the best metal communities in the world, exclusive interviews and merch, and so much more.